Hey guys, Spud here, and today I wanted to go over some changes that have been made to the DCS World Mission Editor and the F10 map within our missions that for me really flew under the radar, and I really don't recall seeing these additions in the latest changelogs. But these changes are super cool because it allows us as the mission maker to really finely tune what our pilots are seeing on their F10 maps in our missions. And this allows us to simulate some very cool and interesting products that have come out recently that allow for bolt-on GPS navigation and Link-16 Datalink capability to older third-generation aircraft for both military and private aggressors alike. These products, most notably Bandit board and RedNet, allow a pilot to see navigation and datalink displays on an iPad strapped to their kneeboard from antennas usually mounted in the cockpit of their jet. And of course, there's also some of the other more secretive iPad apps used by Ukrainian Air Force, Fulcrum, and flanker pilots for both data link and controlling Western weapons such as HARMs and JDAMs. These new F10 map options allow us to give our F4, F5, and Mirage F1 and other pilots a leg up in modern era missions and give them a way to simulate the fantastic commercial off-the-shelf solutions for situational awareness like Bandit board and navigation like ForeFlight, crucially without it becoming a cheat code or ruining the experience of the mission for other pilots. Hopefully, in the future, we can get an EFB or iPad-like kneeboard displayed to replace the oftentimes clunky F10 map. So let's jump in and get started. Alright guys, for our demonstration of how to turn the F10 map into a situational awareness and navigation tool like RedNet or ForeFlight for our third generation fighters, we have a Blue Forces strike package set up and marshalling in the Western Pacific here as they get ready to attack Andersen Air Force Base, and we'll be flying as a Red Aggressor in the F5E Tiger II. For the composition of our Blue Forces strike package, we've got a couple of F-15Es marshalling in the north here on OCA duty. Farther to the south, we've got a couple of F-16Cs also on fighter sweep duty today. Kind of down here in the middle, we've got our South Korean F-4s acting as the strikers of our strike package for today. And then all the way down on the furthest south of the Marshall stack, we've got a couple of Marine Corps FA-18s acting as the SEAD element of our strike package. Out to the west, we have a blue AWACS providing AIC as well as datalink support to the Blue Forces. And then out to the east here, we have an AWACS supporting the Red Forces. And in the north, we have a couple of privately owned Mirage F1 aggressors that are set to jump out there and break up the Blue Forces strike package so we can teach them some lessons. And then we're flying an F5E Tiger II belonging to the VFC 111 Sundowners, the composite aggressor squadron out of Naval Air Station Key West. And this is definitely one of my very favorite skins in all of DCS, that's for sure. So to actually influence what our players are seeing on their F10 maps, so that way we can turn the F10 map into a situational awareness and navigation tool instead of a cheat code, we need to come up to the top left of the mission editor here, hit the Customize tab, go down to Mission Options, and then over here on this right-hand panel, we have all of the options for what our players are seeing on the F10 map here. On the Enforce column here, we need to have it checked for F10 view options. This is going to enforce our mission maker options on the players who join our multiplayer missions. Then, coming on down here, we have the usual slew of options that have been available forever in DCS. Map only, my aircraft, fog of war, allies only, and all. And by default, it's usually set to all when you create a new mission. The new option here is going to be this extended option down here below all. So we'll hit that checkbox there, and then we'll hit the little gear icon so that way we can drill down further into what our F10 map is going to be displaying. Now, the magic of turning the F10 map into a pseudo Bandit board is going to be under the pilot option right here. But for all others, I'm just going to let everyone else, spectators, air bosses, LSOs, JTACs, tactical commanders, and observers, just see everything on the map. And that's so the players who join my missions as enablers, those ATC controllers, AIC controllers, JTACs, things like that, I want them to be able to see everything so that way they can better support the players who are flying jets in our missions. So when it comes to the pilot option here, under the F10 view options, we want to go ahead and select Fog of War. Now, this is a bit of a confusing name for this option, but basically it creates a more Datalink-like environment where the only bad guy units that will show up on the F10 map are going to be those units that have been detected by some sort of sensor. That could be a radar, whether that's an air-to-air or air-to-ground radar, some sort of EW system or raw equipment system, or a pilot's Mark I eyeball. Now, that is all well and good, but it's still a bit of a cheat code because even weapons that are fired off of aircraft or ground units such as SAM sites are going to show up on the F10 map. And datalinks such as Link-4, the older datalink or more newer systems such as Link-16 don't actually show fired weapons unless they're like a huge slow-moving weapon like a cruise missile. So in order to take away weapons, all we need to do is come down here and then we can uncheck the box for weapons showing up on the F10 map. And why don't we just go ahead and uncheck it for enemies and neutral aircraft as well. And that way we won't be able to see any weapons fired from any blue units, and we won't see any weapons fired from any red units, and we won't see any weapons fired from those white neutral units. Now, when it comes to datalink, different datalinks have different capabilities, and especially with the donors who are giving information to the larger picture of the battle space. But usually, individual ground units are not going to show up on Link-16, other than, say, maybe an Air Force CCT or a JTAC with a Link-16 capable terminal. So, but for today's mission, we'll go ahead and turn off ground units. And then some naval units, such as Aegis-class cruisers, or Aegis-equipped cruisers, I should say, will show up on Link-16 because they're capable of donating PPLIs to the Link-16 battle space picture. But sometimes they're going to show up, sometimes they're not going to show up. It depends on the unit itself. So for that, we'll just go ahead and turn off naval units as well. And then usually some helicopters have datalink capabilities, some don't, but for the most part, they're not usually going to show up, so we'll go ahead and turn off helicopters as well. Now, this leaves us with only one type of unit available to be seen in this Fog of War type of option set on the F10 map. And that's going to make sure that our pilots see things on the F10 map that you would usually only see on, say, your F-16's HSD display or your FA-18's SA page. So it allows your older pilots, those guys flying F4s, F5s, Mirage F1s, even MiG-29s, things like that, to basically get a battle space picture that is going to be analogous to what your newer aircraft, your Gen 4 aircraft, your F-16s, FA-18s, JF-17s are going to be seeing on their situational awareness displays, which is really, really cool. And obviously taking away weapons fired here pulls away and pulls back the more cheat code-like functions of the F10 map. So to save that, we'll just go ahead and hit OK here. We'll close out this panel, we'll make sure that we save the mission, and we'll jump into the cockpit of our F5 and kind of demonstrate it from the cockpit itself. But one thing we're going to do here is let's go ahead and get rid of the AWACS so that way we can really show you guys what the Fog of War option gives you on the F10 map. Okay guys, welcome to the office of the F5E Tiger II for the flying portion of our demonstration. Now that we have our F10 map tuned to behave more like a situational awareness tool like Bandit board or a navigational tool like 4Flight. Now, I'm super excited to make this video here, guys, because a lot of these new bolt-on technologies being added to older aircraft are super interesting, and it's really awesome that we can now sort of simulate that here in DCS thanks to these expanded F10 map options, and give our third generation pilots a leg up in modern scenarios without giving them a cheat code and without giving them any more than what our fourth generation pilots can get out of their SA pages and HSD displays. So right off the bat here, let's dig deeper into how the fog of war option for the F10 map actually works here. Zooming into our raw display, we can see we have nails from an F-15 that is orbiting out to the north, and we have nails from the E-2 Hawkeye that's supporting the Blue Forces strike package orbiting way out to the west. And then opening up the F10 map here, we can see that some of the Blue Forces has populated on our F10 map here, and we can of course see our Mirage F1s that are out to the north, and our flight here down to the south. Now what's happening here is only these three flights, the E2, the F4, and the F-15s, are showing up on the sensors of our red side aircraft here. Now, you might be thinking, hey Spud, it's not realistic for raw equipment to donate information to a Datalink network. And you'd absolutely be correct. We're just trying to show you guys the nuts and bolts of how fog of war option actually works. Normally in a modern scenario, you're going to have lots of big ground-based radars and AWACSs out there. That's definitely going to cover up this little bit of unrealism. Of course, if we had an AWACS that was orbiting out here over Rota like we had set up in the mission editor example, we'd be able to see the F-16s that were orbiting in this area here, as well as the F-A-18s on SEAD duty that would be orbiting down here to the south. So if we wanted to cover up this little bit of unrealism, we could just say, hey, maybe these Mirage F1s already have these F-15s on their radar and they're donating it to the network, and maybe our wingman already has the F4s on his radar and he's donating it to the network. And of course, with this E2 out here is banging away with his gigantic radar, so basically everybody knows where he is because his radar is putting so much radiation out into the atmosphere. So when it comes to the F10 map and how these apps like Bandit board or 4Flight actually work, Bandit board is really similar to, say, 4Flight or FD Pro, but just with a Datalink layer layered on top of it. And so the F10 map works very similarly to these apps. We can, of course, pinch and zoom, just like on an iPad app here using our mouse. We can click in our mouse button 3 and then drag, just like you can drag your fingers across the iPad app to give you bearings and distances. We can center the map on our own aircraft super easily here. We can show waypoints that we've loaded into our flight plan, so that way we can easily navigate to waypoints using bearings and distances by dragging out our fingers across the map, just like we would on an iPad. As well as we can get bullseye references from the bullseye, so we can see these F-15s are bullseye 305 for 140 nautical miles at 250. The F4s are bullseye 285 for 130 nautical miles. And then we can, of course, pinch and zoom on our map here to be able to give ourselves our own BRA calls and then be able to commit on various aircraft while maintaining situational awareness on where our friendly flights are. Basically, just like you can on the SA page of an FA-18 or the HSD page on a F-16. So another thing that you can do here is you can change the layout of the map itself. You can go to the altitude option, which is basically DCS World's graphical display of the map, the satellite view option, or the aeronautical chart option labeled map up there. That's probably my favorite option as it allows me to see a lot more, especially here on the Marianas map, where the aeronautical chart is really, really nice that comes with the map. For the desert maps, I will typically go to the satellite view, But the aeronautical chart on those ones can be very helpful as well. And then just like any navigation type app like FD Pro or ForeFlight, we can of course click on an airfield here and get airfield information. So the F10 map's actually pretty darn realistic and pretty cool when it comes to a comparison to these app type programs. So one thing you might be thinking here, Spud, is the F10 map gives me serious DCS World performance ka-chugs. It tanks my frame rate, and it makes me crash into the ground, crash into my wingmen, crash into the tankers, things of that nature. Well, the best way you can possibly avoid any of these DCS performance ka-chugs is to avoid clicking on any of the aircraft you see here on the F10 map. When you click on an aircraft on the F10 map, the back end of the DCS World simulation is rendering the graphics of that aircraft, the aircraft's 3D model, the aircraft's 3D model of the weapons it's carrying, the terrain around the aircraft, because it's setting things up for you to then be able to hit F2 on your keyboard or any of the other external views and snap that external view directly to that aircraft. And of course, that's always going to create a bit of a performance hog. So you can be disciplined and avoid clicking on those other aircraft, as well as a mission maker, you can help prevent this by potentially locking your players out of being able to use external views in your missions in those expanded mission options that we took a look at earlier for these F10 options. So let's go ahead and we will see we're getting committed onto the F4s that are acting as the strikers as part of the Blue Forces strike package. They're BRA 275 for 80 nautical miles. So we'll go ahead and start flying out towards them. They're at BRA 275, so we'll go ahead and push our throttles up to full mil. Got our wingman over there. We'll start to adjust our radar, make sure our radar elevation is set to 0 degrees. And we're going to start to come on downstairs and try to go for a low to high aspect on these F4s, so that way we can get them onto our radar as quickly and expeditiously as possible. Now, of course, guys, please keep in mind that our example here that we're flying through is a very much oversimplified example. It's just meant to be a demonstration for you guys of how this actually works in game here. Your missions are going to be a heck of a lot more complex and a heck of a lot more realistic, of course. So we'll go ahead and keep on continuing down to 19,000, and that'll give us a nice, good low to high aspect on these F4s. Looking back on our map here, we can pinch and zoom on in. They are currently 275 for 60. And then using our situational awareness here, we can see that our friends, the Mirage F1s out here, are definitely committing onto the F-15Es that are orbiting out to the north. Now, nobody has picked up the FA-18s or the F-16s on any sensors yet, and that's why they're not displaying on the F10 map at the moment, thanks to that fog of war option that we placed on top of everything. And of course, we're not going to be able to have the cheat code of seeing any weapon launches because we turned off the ability for anyone to see any types of weapons on the F10 map. Alright, so we'll go ahead and level off here. Kind of came a little bit lower than 19,000, but that's no problem. Can see we're still flying out towards our F4 friends here. They're about 277 at this point, so we'll go ahead and come off to the right a little bit more. It's hard to see exactly on the HSI and the F5 because it's not super fine, but that shouldn't be too big of an issue. And it looks like I'm just barely starting to get a little bit of glint off of the canopy of one of those F4s. so I can just barely start to see them visually. So we're set up in a good position here. I'm just going to tilt the radar up just a hair. And boom, looks like we've got nails from those F4s. Not quite sure if they're spikes just yet. And we can see they're definitely closing. 24 nautical miles out. Should start to pick them up on our radar relatively soon. Still kind of pointing our nose towards that glint. And there we go. Now we can start to see them on our radar. We'll squeeze our B-scope down to a lower range. Can't quite get our radar cursor onto them just yet. And we'll tell our wingman to go ahead and engage bandits.
Engage bandits.
Alright, I guess our Blue Forces strike package was not expecting to be engaged by bandits in their Marshall stack. Alright, missile launch. It looks like it's coming towards me. I'm going to go ahead and go defensive here. Make sure that we get our sidewinders turned on. We're going to go resume on our radar up to dogfight mode. Fox 2. Looks like he jettisoned his bombs. And my missile was decoyed away by his flares. And it is now a descent down to the ocean. And lock him up again. Alright, he's going into the clouds. At this point, a good aggressor pilot would call knock it off, but that's not really the way we do things here in DCS. Out of params there, so I'm not going to take the shot. Alright, splash that bandit. So now we got to start looking for the other F4. I'm not quite sure where he is at this point. So if we needed to, we could take a look at our bandit board and see what's going on here. So we can see he's up at about 15,000. I'm down at 11,000 or 12,000 or so. And it looks like that he is offensive against my wingman. And we can see there that that's not really cheating. It's really exactly what you would see on the HSD or the SA page of a Hornet or F-16. I can sort of see these guys. Who's that? That's an F4? Cool. Fox 2. And it's probably going to get decoyed. And splash. Cool. So that is definitely a good lesson to learn for the Blue Forces of this exercise, that they definitely have to be in a posture and be ready to be engaged by bandits while in the Marshall stack, starting to coalesce the strike package. So we can also start to see we're getting nails from F-16s and F-18s on our raw equipment here. And if we open up the F10 map, we should start to see that we do in fact have the F-18s that are marshalling to the south, and the F-16s that are marshalling to the north are in fact populated on the F10 map here. And it looks like the engagement out to the north potentially went rather badly for our fellow Mirage pilots, because it looks like they got splashed. I'm not quite sure if they traded with the F-15s, because the F-15s are now off of our SA display, but it could just be that they are no longer on anybody's sensors, so that's why they're no longer populating on our F10 map here, just like they would be if we were using some sort of real data link. Now, of course, that would be rectified if we did have our AWACS out here, but hopefully this video was interesting for you guys here. Obviously, we made things a little bit unrealistic in order to show you guys exactly how Fog of War actually works behind the scenes. But when you add in your AWACS aircraft to your modern scenario, it's going to cover up that little bit of unrealism, no problem, super easily. So, if you guys enjoyed the video, please leave a like and a subscribe. And like I said, guys, I'm super excited for this because it really helps to give our older aircraft a little bit of a leg up in those modern scenarios without it being a cheat code and without giving them more info than is available to our 4th generation pilots. Now, I do hope that one day in the future the F10 map can be moved to a kneeboard display like on our pilot models here, like maybe on a little iPad model, or even just moved to the kneeboard display just like that, or some sort of new system like the EFB or iPad system that is in the C-130 or the F4E. So, we'll see you in the next one, guys. Fly safe out there and enjoy this beautiful game. Hopefully, this gives you guys some ideas of how you can use these new F10 options.